Welcome to EditFest Global 2024, and starting right now, a discussion dedicated to the 20th anniversary of Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, moderated by Joshua Handler from Picture House 441. Take it away, Joshua.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to EditFest Global. My name is Joshua Handler. I'm the co-founder and lead programmer for Picture House 441. And a huge thank you to ACE for having us here to celebrate Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow's 20th anniversary. We have its editor, Sabrina Plisko, and first assistant editor, Eric Jessen, here with us. Sabrina and Eric, thank you so much for being here. This is so much fun that we get to explore this film that I've now loved for 20 years.
Thanks for the invite.
Us. We haven't seen it in 20 years either, so we're brushing up ourselves and being reminded of how beautiful this movie is.
So let me ask you, before we really dig into these amazing clips that you guys have prepared for us today, Sabrina, you had just told me that you had just rewatched the film. What was it like rewatching this film for the first time in so long? And Eric, I'd love to hear the same for you.
It did remind me of how beautiful this movie was and the goal of what the team was setting out to do, and especially the vision of Carrie Conran, who came up with this beautiful piece. We all knew we were working on something different and special, and to watch it again now, it just reminded me of how we achieved it, and I'm still very proud of this movie. I just think it's a great piece of art, and I hope it goes down in history as a special homage to film noir, and it really did kick off a lot of new workflows in our industry in the CG world.
Eric, what about you? What was it like for you to read it?
I just am surprised how many big laughs I still get out of it, because there's some funny moments. And I remember, when you're an assistant, you have to QC, I don't know, 100 times it seems like, and I always get a little chuckle. And there's a few little moments that I still just had a big LOL.
Was there anything in particular that you can pinpoint that you were like, oh, I forgot about that line, or just something that continuously makes you laugh every time you see this?
There's some visual gags that, I guess I could spoil it, but there's a nice moment when Sky Captain Jude and Gwyneth Paltrow are in bed together, and they wake up, and I think their clothes have been contaminated, so they're in bed naked, and he's looking at her very lovingly, and she's all, Joe, and then she says, turn around, and the camera moves over with Joe moving over, and it's his what was his name, Kaji, there next to him, staring at him, saying, "Hi, Joe." It's just, that one just made me laugh. It's the visual stuff. I'm a big fan of camera movements playing it, making a joke.
Absolutely. I have to say that gave me a huge laugh as well. I totally forgot about that gag. And Sabrina, I can see you chuckling at that as well. Was that something that really got you when you just rewatched this movie?
Yeah, we all love that, and it was just such a nod to filmmaking in the golden age of films, and that's what Carrie was striving to do, is to make it visually, stylistically, tonally, all those things, an homage to an older movie. And so that's why I'm not sure if everybody kind of got that, but it still holds up, and it's still timeless because it did achieve that. And one other thing that I was impressed by, and I had just, stepping away, is I really admired Gwyneth's performance in this piece after seeing it all these years, because she really stepped into that nostalgic kind of acting as well. And I know that that's what drew her to this piece, as she saw the original clip that Carrie had made to sell this movie, and she didn't even read the script, and she just said, I'm in. So I think I just give her props for really pulling it off and making this strange movie at the time, which was not easy for the actors, but she just did a really good job, and she was consistent throughout.
And she really nailed the voice, the accent, the comedic timing. I mean, she is such a pleasure to watch, and her interplay with Jude. I mean, you could not find two more perfectly cast leads, both in terms of the way that they banter with one another and just their chemistry. I mean, their chemistry is undeniable when you watch this film.
You can tell they had fun together, right?
It's so true. And I love the fact that you both mentioned that this is an homage to films, to films of, decades gone by, the 30s, the 40s, the golden age of Hollywood. But what I love about this film is the fact that it's not a slavish recreation of those kinds of films. It's something that is very reverential to those kinds of films, but very much its own thing. And I love the fact that Carrie had that kind of a vision to build upon those films instead of just, again, slavishly recreating them.
And there's a ton of Easter eggs in it if you're a film fan. King Kong is scaling the Empire State Building in the background if you look closely enough. And when they're cruising around underwater, they go by a ship called the Venture, which is the one that was it King Kong was brought over to the island on. So there's a lot of nice little moments in there.
That's so funny. I haven't seen the original King Kong in ages, but that's so interesting that there's all these King Kong and I'm sure other Easter eggs thrown into the film.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the animators any more in there that maybe we will never know about, but they're there.
It would almost be fun to do another whole panel with the animators and that entire team just devoted to the Easter eggs that are, as you said, probably thrown into this film that none of us have any idea about.
That would be the NC-17 version, I think.
I know. I wonder if they hit anything dirtier or anything like that in there.
Maybe.
Like some Disney films have been known to have. I want to roll the original short film, The World of Tomorrow, that this film is based on, so that everybody can see it and see where Sky Captain came from.
And just to set it up a little bit, Carrie did this with like a Mac 2, like before there was even an iMac. He worked on it for years.
I think it was 4 years in his garage, right?
Well, he finished it in '98, I believe. And shot, green screens in his living room and got friends to be actors in it. And it's just incredible. So this is the one that they would show all the actors to get them interested in doing it to be involved with. So
306. Calling Sky Captain. Come in, Sky Captain. Repeat, calling Sky Captain. Come in, Sky Captain. Repeat, calling Sky Captain. Come in, Sky Captain. Calling Sky Captain. Come in, Sky Captain. Repeat, calling Sky Captain. Come in, Sky Captain. Calling Sky Captain. Sky Captain. Come in, Sky Captain. Repeat, calling Sky Captain. Calling Sky Captain. Come in, Sky Captain. Repeat, calling Sky
Sky Captain, I'm on my way.
I mean, that is glorious. Like, that is truly glorious. How on earth did he make that thing in his garage with a couple of friends? I mean, that's astonishing to me.
That's the brilliance of Cary Conran. He just had this in his head. His intention was to make this movie all by himself and just, gather help when he needed it. But that was his original intention. But because I think this took him, I'm not sure if this, I think it was up to 4 years to make that, and he realized if he didn't get help that, he'd still be making it. So, that's where he decided to branch out and go ahead.
Yeah, he and his brother Kevin Conran. He did all the illustrations and did the design for the film, and was they were a team. But Cary went to Cal Arts and was in the film program, but all his friends were in the animation program. So he wanted to bring that style, the animation workflow, into making films, and he changed. It was the very first one, and he really changed the way films are made now.
It's interesting, Eric, you saying that, and obviously that is totally true. I was reading an interview with him from about 5 years ago that he had done for the 15th anniversary of the film, and he said that he had absolutely no intention of changing the way films are made. He had absolutely no idea what this film was going to become. And it's interesting because that is so frequently the case with these films that ended up changing the industry, changing workflows. That they were ones that were done unintentionally, and they just happen to be these utterly brilliant, visionary pieces of cinema that, changed the way that everybody works.
Technology got to the point finally where that can be done. All that stuff was done with off-the-shelf software. And like DV cameras, it was crazy.
The film itself, The Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow, was shot on high definition video, wasn't it?
It was HD Cam Cine Alta, not even HD Cam SR. So I think normal iPhones are better quality now than what we had.
How was the decision made to shoot using that format? Was it just because it was the easiest and the least expensive, or was there a technical reason for it?
It was economical. I don't think we could have shot film and processed it and everything. And our workflow was that the HD cam came back to me. I ingested everything, made dailies myself. We cut it in Final Cut 3, which was painful for Sabrina because nothing was real time. And then when something got locked, I'd bring it back and up-res everything using the deck, and then I would put all the blue screen plates on the server for the compositors and everyone to have access to. So it was all just in-house and easy. It wasn't like we had to process the film and take it out and scan it. That would have been so expensive at the time that it couldn't be done.
Yeah, I think it was too experimental, and nobody was definitely sure of the workflow and the pipeline. So, the HD gave everybody a little bit of breathing room financially to just experiment. And we should probably explain a little bit about the workflow of this project, because it's truly, I think, the first kind of hybrid movie that was potentially ever made this way. So, very much like an animated movie, as Carrie wanted to explore the options of how that's made. There was a storyboard cut initially, and then it went to 2D previs, and then there was a table read at some point. I don't remember how many months before a shoot when they cast Gwyneth and Jude, and so there was a table read. So then the audio became available to be used with the storyboards, and then the 2D post biz. And then once that was kind of laid out, then they started altering into 3D previs, which I think at the time might have been one of the first movies ever to use that technology. But because sets were built in the computer in this movie, they needed to build the 3D space. And then they shot with doubles just to really understand that the camera angles and the things were working. So we had doubles, and that was all done here in Van Nuys. We had a studio in Van Nuys where they set up stages, and that's where animators were set up. So the doubles really helped the learning curve of how to set things up and what was working and what didn't.
It made everyone understand that
you were more part of that, Eric, I think.
Yeah, it was clear that it couldn't be done the way they thought, because everything was supposed to be done using classic photography and done in 2D. So, but that really limited where things could happen, because you'd have a picture and the actor would be just in front of that and not much could happen. So they had to radically change things and bring in a whole 3D team in, and you know, there's that you can see from the short that most of that was just photography and the actors put in front of it. But you know,
yeah, then they realized they couldn't do a whole movie that way, because it was very static, you know. So in order to move the camera with actors, they had to switch up and learn to take those still images and stretch them to create the 3D space. And now when you watch the movie, there's hardly any still, like everything's moving all the time. And so that became like the style that Carrie wanted to go for.
And one thing that was unique was, I guess they call it photogrammetry now. Polly Perkins enters Radio City Music Hall, and it's the whole lobby and the beautiful architecture of the place, and that was done all with still photography, and Gwyneth was just walking into a blue warehouse basically, and all the pictures were stitched together in a globe, I should say, and if you could,
well, they stitched them flat and then they stretched them to create the 3D. And because this was a real location, that's why they used stills. I mean, there's plenty of locations in this movie where they created them themselves, but this was based on real Radio City Music Hall.
Yeah, this shows exactly what they needed to know when they shot. They went to England and they shot for 6 weeks. I think it was something
30
like
days,
that. Yeah. And so they needed all this information on set to plan the camera moves. So they had on set our previs that they would run through a keyer and try to roughly figure out the move, and then they would bring it back to Van Nuys and track the cameras, and then the result was this.
It's amazing how realistic that is when you view it. I mean, having been to Radio City many times over the course of my life, it's amazing to me to see that, and just to see the the painstaking detail that is put into realizing Radio City without actually being in Radio City.
Yeah, I mean, we probably paid a license fee to use the images, but we didn't have to have a whole crew there, and we just couldn't do that for the price. I mean, this movie was low budget. It was an independent film, and most of the people on it it was their first jobs, and we got so lucky hiring just amazing people that they went on to have amazing careers in the visual effects industry. And I'm still friends with them, and it's just amazing that we made this the way we did and started it. I mean, like right now, I worked on The Mandalorian, and we use this same workflow for it. We would get a storyboard reel, and then we cut previs and have a complete previs cut, because we need to figure out what we needed to have on the volume wall, the LED volume wall. That's not as restrictive as Sky Captain. The actors couldn't move around a lot for Sky Captain. They were in these little quadrants of the soundstage.
One of the interesting things about this is once they had a set built virtually, they would recreate it in a blue screen. We used blue screen on a stage, but it was just blue. And then where there was a prop, they would put a blue block so the actors wouldn't run into that. But there was real spatial correlation between the virtual set and the blue screen stage. And because they were so meticulous, there was everything was pre-planned. Every shot was pre-planned. And because there was only a limited amount of days to shoot, they had to be really efficient. So we shot on the Lucas stage in Elstree, I think, which is where they filmed Star Wars, which is kind of cool. But they had multiple sets set up at any given time. So let's say there was three or four blue screen stages, because they had to shoot so fast. They had to shoot 2 or 3 scenes a day. So the actors would shoot in one blue screen stage and do one scene. And then as soon as they wrapped, they would run like right next door to the next blue. It's all blue, but it was definitely designed to be, the next scene. So it was a really efficient way of working. And people doing the blue screen sets had to revamp the layout to keep up with production or lead production. So it was kind of a interesting process, and people don't understand how fast these actors had to move through their scenes. And it's kind of fun to see that, but people don't know how fast everything had to move.
Well, people are sort of used to it now, seeing all these behind the scenes stuff, but this was the very first film shot all on blue screen or green screen, except for 2 scenes. We had some reshoots where we shot an office, and I think the tent scene in Nepal is it's kind of silly to shoot that.
Yeah, we were running out of time, so we couldn't do it. Yeah, we had to shortcut and do minimal blue screen on those couple scenes, so they had a few more props in those scenes. But it's just amazing. So so once the footage was shot, then that became the footage for the final cut. So there was just so many steps to this movie that I don't think, yes, it's definitely used these days, but people don't often do all of those steps, like shoot with doubles. Like we were just learning, or everybody was just learning and experimenting so much to figure out the best way to, get this accomplished. So now it's much more efficient in movies that are shot today because the technology is much further along, and but it is standard. I would say this is, one of the first full hybrid movies, and that's kind of what launched my career in hybrid movies. I do have an interesting story. So Eric can tell you how he was brought in, but I was brought in a little late to the project. I think I had worked with Raffaella De Laurentiis and John Abnett on prior movies, and so I knew them. And this project was underway, and Eric was on it from the very, very beginning with Raffaella. And Raffaella called me, I think it was 6 to 8 weeks before they were supposed to shoot in London. They had got the cast. They pretty much had a cut of the movie, I think was in 3D by then, because we were getting close to shooting. But Raffaella called me and said, I need you to come in and help get this movie ready for shooting, because the cut is the shooting script. And I said, okay, I'm curious. So she said, but I want you to come in, and I want you to secretly hide out in the cutting room, learn Final Cut, which I hadn't ever worked on before. So Eric and Tim helped me learn Final Cut. I'm sure I have less hair than I used to, because that software was so frustrating way back then. So I just hunkered down, and she said, make this a movie, because it's playing sort of long, slow, and flat. So she said, I need you to make it a movie and shape it so that when we go into shoot, we have a very efficient visual shooting script. So that's what I did. So I went in for about a month, and I had known John Abnett really, really well. He's one of the key players in my early career. So she said, I need you to hide from John. I do not want John to see you, because I want you to get to know Carrie and get to know this movie, and I don't want John to monopolize you. So every time John would come to the building, John has a habit, I've worked with him many times, he has a habit of bouncing a basketball when he enters. And so every time we heard this basketball, Raffaella would call me from the front office to editorial, like, go out the back. So I'd run out the back, because she did not want John to see me. And we were all in with the animators by this point. So it was cool. It was one big happy family. We did have little partitions. So I'd have to run and hide for a month. And then, I was working away, did the cut. After about a month, I think we decided it was time for John to know I was part of the project. So I remember one day he comes bouncing the basketball down the hallway, and we were in a little cubby in the middle of the building, and he got to our door, which the three of us were in, and the basketball sound stopped. And I didn't turn around. I just kept working. And he went, Brina? Because that's what he calls me. And so that was the reveal of me being a part of the project. But originally I was supposed to be there only for the 6 weeks to get the show cut ready for shooting. And of course I didn't leave, and I ended up being there a year and a half. But Eric was there from the very beginning, and he can tell you a little bit about that, because he pretty much set up editorial.
I helped put all the tables together for the warehouse. Now, I got into post-production kind of late. I worked in story development, and I worked for about 10 years in that, and I was working for Raffaella as her story editor. So I feel like I have some sort of experience that other people don't necessarily have that lends itself to editorial, but I was still didn't have my chops. And sometimes Raffaella would move the avids into her bungalow, and she did Dragonheart and Daylight in there, and I'd peek in through the door and go, ooh, those avids are amazing. So she was nice enough to give me a 6-month severance, and I went out and I worked on some very small films, and I decided I wanted to get into editorial. And she asked me to come work on World of Tomorrow, and it really was this really crappy, dangerous warehouse in Van Nuys, and with a bunch of super young people, and the experience was, we just recently got together for a 20th anniversary reunion, and everyone just says they're still trying to chase that experience. It was such a good time, and I really consider it my grad school, because here I was with all the compositors, all the 3D animators, all the producers, and the director was always there, And part of the efficiency was that Kerry and his brother Kevin were there. So if they had a question, boom, he was there over their shoulder in 5 minutes. So all that efficiency just, was unlike anything else. And we really, the dirty little secret about this movie is that it was about 15 million to do. And at the time they wanted to say that it cost, close to 100 million. Look what we did. But if it were done today, we'd be touting like, look at what we did for 15 million. And it really was, everyone works for so cheap, but they got so much out of it that, I wouldn't change anything even. And it got me in the union.
It's amazing to me that this only cost 15 million, considering the astounding production values. Sabrina, I want to go back to something that you had said. You said that that Raphael had brought you on just to work for the 6 weeks to get the film moving at a bit of a faster pace and less slow than it was before. What was the film looking like at the point that you came in, and where do you feel that you really contributed to getting it where Raphael wanted it to be by the time it was ready to shoot?
Well, I remember being fascinated by the project, but it needed some shaping from what I remember. And it was just, you can tell a little bit from that opening piece. It was very methodical and slow. And I just knew audiences needed to have a little more peaks and valleys, as we all do as editors. That's our goal, to build and shape a movie. Again, we only had the audio and the doubles at that point. So I just tried to shape it and cut it a little, like the action sequences a little faster, even though I know Kerry had a style and a tone he was going for. So it was trying to maintain what Kerry wanted, but shape it so that they knew. And I don't remember how long that piece was. I wish I could remember, but I don't. So I remember shaping it, tightening it, doing what we do. And I remember screening it for everybody, and I remember John and Raphael were like, okay, now we've got a movie. And so it was just doing that. I don't think I did anything hugely radical, but it was also wrapping my head around the process of how we were doing this, and coming in completely open-minded to it, because I hadn't worked. I forget how long you guys were on this, Eric, before I came in. You were on it 9 months or something like that before I ever came in?
I've forgotten everything too.
It was quite a while. Obviously, Kerry had been on it for years at that point, but I came in fresh, and I just could do my thing to get it ready. But I remember everybody getting excited when they saw even that early cut, like, okay, this is what we're going to go shoot. And obviously there was notes and all that, but it just, we didn't have much time from when I came in to get it ready to shoot, because then they all went to England to start building those stages. And I ended up going for 10 days over there just to help. And I think, was Tim there the whole time, Eric? I can't remember. Because we needed somebody there. I didn't want to be there the whole time, but Tim was there. He was our other editorial partner. And he would, we would just key in the actors' performances into the previs. That's how they knew that things were lining up. And obviously if the actor walked too far off the screen, it was like, oh, we got to redo that shot. So editorial had to be very much a part of the process of shooting to make sure technically we got the right shots, because camera moves were built in. It was so pre-planned that we had to get it right. And obviously when they shot close-ups for all the footage in the airplane, which there's plenty of that of Jude and Gwyneth, that's where I got to go in and just have a lot of fun building performances. But a lot of the actual big stage shots were very pre-choreographed, so there wasn't a lot of straying from that. So yeah, that was
no coverage,
my job,
right?
and that was fun. What's that, Eric?
There's no coverage except for maybe that cockpit stuff and some of those smaller.
Right.
We didn't
Some of the
even
smaller
have
intimate scenes, yeah.
we didn't even have scene numbers. Everything was just visual effects sequence names and numbers. So this was my first big film, and that's just the way it was. It's like, whoa, scene numbers, and it's almost like you just didn't have to look at the script at a certain point.
Wow. I think we should run the illustration of what the first scene of the film actually ended up looking like. I know about a half hour ago we watched the short upon which this is based, but I think we should roll the opening of the film so we can see, what you guys did.
The look and feel, yeah.
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 So as you can see, it stayed very true to the original piece that Carrie did, but the look got a little more polished, and the color we just dialed in with a tad bit of color, but it was very true to the original. And there's, as you can see when you watch this movie, Carrie loves dissolves and layering and multiple images over each other and circle wipes and what, like he's very there was just a lot of fun of playing with these images, multi-layered and all those things that people consider gimmicky, but it was very stylistic and added to the piece and added to the tone of the old-timey feel.
Speaking of the old-timey feel, I know that Carrie had the cast watch to Have and Have Not and The Thin Man in order to get into the style of those films and those performances, and I mean, obviously two all-time classics. Did he have you two study any films of the day, or were there any films of that day that were on your mind when you were working on this one?
I don't remember him giving us homework. I can't, because I came in late. I don't remember watching any of those. I know Wizard of Oz was a huge influence on Carrie, and we ended up paying homage to Wizard of Oz very much so in this movie. And even, the reveal of Totenkopf at the end is very Wizard of Oz, reveal of the wizard kind of a thing. But I don't remember watching other movies. I just know stylistically he wanted to represent that kind of a tone, and that's what we went for.
Exactly.
Was there ever any discussion of the entire film being in black and white, like pure black and white, or was it always going to be kind of black and white, but with some color added in?
Yeah, absolutely. It was going to be black and white.
It was going to be black and white, right, Eric? Wasn't that his original intention?
Yes, and actually, the film was supposed to be released in chapters. There were chapter cards, and we actually shot the actors sort of like, hey, posing for these chapter cards that we did use. But I think as it became a summer blockbuster, I think studio type people, producers said, well, we can't do that, and it cannot be black and white, and that was a big deal to do, because that was a Stephen Laws is the compositor guru who took on the developing the color look for it, and it just became it's beautiful.
Yeah, so
absolutely,
it was shot in color, but then converted to black and white to create all that film noir extreme lighting look. And then there was many experimentations, and Steve Laws jumped in to present options, like how do we keep it that style but give it a hint of that. And it wasn't just sepia, that was too dreary. So they added beautiful color, but it was very subtle, and only maybe parts of the frame were black and white, but certain parts had a hint of color. But that became a very big exploration to try to lock in what they could achieve, but still keep Carrie's original intention.
Going off of this theme of keeping Carrie's original intention while also satisfying other people. Let's ask you about when you test at the opening of this film. Obviously, it adheres very, very closely to the World of Tomorrow short, but it does move at a slightly faster pace. It's very efficient. It's very economical. Can you talk about adhering to Carrie's vision and true to Carrie's vision while also satisfying those that wanted the film to move in a little bit of a faster way, and reconciling those two?
That's the job of an editor, and that's what we do, is to try to make everybody happy, right? So I learned very quickly what Carrie's sensibilities were, but I also knew audiences and studios and producers wouldn't sit and watch that. So I kept the tone, but I just sped everything up and just took, just did what we do as editors and just tightened and took the most fun action pieces together, the highly stylized parts, layered more. I did all those things that we do as an editor to just get it moving faster. But there is so much to look at. It's not, it was never designed to be a jump cutty, fast paced movie like a Guy Ritchie movie. It just wasn't designed that way, because there is so much to look at, and it does build towards the tone of the movie. But I just had to make it more palatable and keep the fun, and maybe make it more fun in some instances. And there are things that we did experiment editorially, scenes. We keep this scene? Do we take this chapter out? All those kinds of things we did as normal, but that was the goal, just to try to be true.
There's
to
some
Carrie.
fun. There's some fun action in it.
Oh yeah,
the flying wing sequence is that's not slow, and the underwater battle. I don't know if we want to watch some of the flying wing sequence, but
we should watch some of the flying wing sequence. It was fascinating to see the.
It is more action oriented, those sequences. So those are kind of fun. Yeah, it is fun to see them side by side, so you can see how it ended up. And obviously, when you have early stages and you just have the read through, I always call that minimal dialogue, because they don't do a lot of ad libbing. They're just reading the script and the read through, so you don't get reactions of things that you get on set because the actors would look at the cut before they would shoot a scene, so they would get a better sense of what they were shooting in this blue world. It's like, oh, we're flying through the city as opposed to sitting on a blue block and, in the middle of a stage. So it was very helpful and instrumental for them to understand it. And then, there was movement in the cockpit, and, then we had more audio, obviously, once we shot, but it was very minimal for the previs. And if we needed a really key line, which we often did, we do what we call editing room theater, and we end up reading lines to pop in there, because it's like, because you need to tell the story. And, a lot of this movie is told visually, but there are things you need to be told to understand. So, we would have a little editing room theater, which is very common in animation.
and editing room sighing. Remember, we had this moment where Sky Captain comes through the door after a long day, and we needed him to sigh. So I took the old Apple laptop and I recorded, and we put it in temp, and it just never left the movie. And like during all the mixes, I'd look at Sabrina, and she'd be like, "Yeah, it's still there." So I'm Sky Captain's sigh.
Yeah.
Silly,
Again,
silly
the little
moments.
gems of Well, yeah, the little hidden things that we get to participate and do to contribute.
And also, you guys were talking a little bit earlier about Easter eggs. I mean, there's that shot of Polly turning upside down. It's like the shot of Darth Vader in the original Star Wars turning upside down in the cockpit of his ship. Let me ask you: Can you guys both talk about expanding that previs from what we saw into that fully formed, beautifully cut and very thrilling sequence with all the wonderful interplay between Polly and Sky Captain and Dex. I mean, it's just a beautifully constructed sequence. Can you talk about fleshing out the previs into what we just saw?
I wish I could remember like the early cut of that before I came in, but this is probably one of those sequences where we experimented a lot with, the action and intercutting with Dex. And I don't know when Giovanni came into the mix, but obviously their performances always bring so much more than previs characters or doubles. And so sometimes that dictates also how you do the intercutting. But, again, because the shots were so pre-planned, I had building blocks that I had to work with. I didn't have a wealth of dailies. So I had to just kind of work with the limited pieces that we had, because we could rarely build something new late in the game. It kind of had to be from the shots that were in the pipeline and created within the sets that they had. So I feel like that was probably ongoing throughout, not only the previs, but also in the final. Once we had performances, we were just probably flushing the intercutting out throughout the process until we kind of got to this final cut. So, but again, because we didn't have a lot of dailies, you're limited. When you've got close-ups, you could use those, but we didn't have a lot of other footage. There's wasn't much to cut away to.
How did you use those restrictions to your advantage? Did it force you to be more creative in any instances while working on this film?
It does force you to be creative, and then when you were also limited, even with the performances, because we had limited coverage, this is where I could and would try things that may not have been done before. Like, I want this piece of footage for one actor, but I want the head of Jude from this other piece. And so I would do slop comps and put things together, or firing guns, or put a different arm on Jude. And I remember the first time I ever did that, I'm sure Eric's like, "What are you doing over there?" And I'm like, we'd send it off to the VFX team, and sure enough, they'd come marching in like, "What are you doing? What do you want here?" I'm like, "Listen, if I can do this in 5 minutes, I know you guys can do a really good job, and put that head on Jude and make these comps sell for what we need to do for the story." So it was early days of that kind of, techniques being done. I think now it's much more common, and the technology is much more available now, where you can speed ramp in between lines and you can do all these kinds of things. But then it was just, it was the next stage up from film almost, where you had very few tools to use to try this kind of stuff. But so yeah, it became kind of a thing. I worked on another movie where I started doing this in live action too, and I would use these same techniques. And another editor I worked with, she's like, "What are you doing?" And so anyway, I taught her how to do it, and so she started calling up the SABS maneuver. So it's just like taking the best bits and putting them all together to make a shot. So it's something we can do as editors to contribute to helping tell the story. It's kind of fun. It's all very time consuming to do that kind of stuff, but it is a way we can help to contribute.
Do you remember any particular shots that were particularly tricky for you to pull off with these reconstructions and things like that? And Eric, I would love to hear your recollections as well of Sabrina's constructing her own shots, replacing body parts, things like that.
Well, I'll just tell a little anecdote. We were, like Sabrina said, we were in this little cubbyhole in the middle of the building, and everyone would come in and out all the time and say hi and watch some of the cuts. And then one day, this one compositor was peeking her head in, and she watched and she said, "Where's my shot?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, we had to cut it." And she's like, "Whoop," and she just took off to the visual effects producers, and we were then moved to another part of the facility after that because no one could see. You spend probably months working on a shot, and all of a sudden it's just gone, and so felt kind of bad, but it's life in the big city.
Yeah, I mean,
Sabrina's
pretty
fault.
common knowledge. Yeah, it's pretty common knowledge that it's what happens. Things get cut, things get moved around. But to have these animators be right there with us, who were giving their heart and soul to like catch a glimpse of something that they probably weren't supposed to be aware of, because obviously, it has to go through a process of the director has to approve it and producers have to approve it before it's official. So we had to be careful. So yeah, we were moved to a different part of a different adjacent building where we were a little more privately set up, so people couldn't, peek in. But the other beauty to that was, I don't remember a specific shot that was troublesome. It was all just part of the nature of it. But I just remember there was something, and I don't remember the specific shot. I'm like, I just want the plane over here to do this. And I'm like, who's doing that shot? So I literally walked to the artist, which we never get to do that in this day and age. And I said, here's what I want. Can you do that? And I knew it was what Carrie also wanted. And so I could work with the artist and describe to them what I was looking for. And they could literally block it out right in front of me. And I'm like, that's it. Or, whatever. It was just so special that we had that opportunity, because we don't get to do that very much anymore unless you have a team in your editorial, which I love it when I can do that. But that's where it was pretty special.
Well, we had that one sequence with the Sir Laurence Olivier's recreating his performance from an old BBC documentary. So that was born an editorial. I don't know if we want to watch that. If you could bring it up.
Let's cue it up.
A little bit. The big finale reveal of Totenkopf, which is Carrie's homage, to revealing the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. So let's take a look at that clip, and then we can talk a little bit about how this came to be.
Who dares come before me?
Who dares enter this place? What is begun cannot be stopped. The time for this world is over.
Hello, Doctor.
Okay, the cool thing about this little section, and I had to be reminded recently, is that Jude actually suggested that Totenkopf be played by Laurence Olivier. And as Carrie said, it's because Jude always wanted to play against Laurence Olivier. So this was his one opportunity to perform against Laurence Olivier. So then it became, and of course Carrie loved the idea, like, oh my gosh, Laurence Olivier in my movie? Yes, let's do it. I don't remember how we got approval from the estate to use his likeness. I don't remember how we chose this particular piece of footage. Eric, do you remember how this documentary
It was just an
came
old
about?
talking head documentary from the BBC. Just, not very exciting.
Right, so because we needed a head close-up. So, and then it became a matter of, this is, AI didn't exist then. This is like early form of AI, but manually created. And I remember we had the dialogue, and then we had to go about choosing how we were going to match up image to dialogue. So, Tim took a rough pass at how to do that and trying to get things to go on the lips. And then I think I took it and started doing jump cuts so that, we could make it sync up a little better. And of course, I'm, pretty good with eyes. And this is where I come into my, I learned early how to work with animals, same things, facial movements and head tilts and eye blinks and all those things to match up body language to audio. So yeah, we pulled out all the trickery with head movements, jump cuts, and then the visual effects team did the, fuzzing in and out and little jitteriness and all that stuff to create this performance. But and then of course we slowly do a push in the whole way. So by the end, we're not concentrating on the mouth, but just on the eye movements, because this is too much dialogue to try to get in sync. So
it's amazing how convincing it is. What did you say, Sabrina?
Did I leave anything out, Eric, of that?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, that was born in editorial for sure.
Let me ask you, speaking of the visual effects, what resolution were the VFX rendered in? I don't know if you guys know the answer to that. The only reason why I ask is because I know that what did you say, just HD?
HD, yeah. We had an
HD.
early, if you want to get into the weeds of it all, but we had a Kona card, and it was, the Kona card was like $10,000, and it did not work when we started. It would just kernel panic the machine left and right, and they said, oh, it'll work by the time you guys need it. And we're like, okay. And then actually Blackmagic wrote the codec for it. So we're using this Blackmagic HD codec. And it was 1920 by 1080. And we had a little Cine Alta monitor that was probably not even 26 inches that they would final shots on. Everyone would be crowded around this it must have been maybe even 24 inch. I mean, it had to be bigger than that. And it's like a whole conference room of people, like 30. And at the end of it was this TV, and there just everyone's it's like, oh, CBB, final. It was, and it was hot in those rooms. Let me tell you, that Van Nuys warehouse with insufficient bathrooms and air conditioning was. That's why we all bonded.
I think there was 80 people, right, Eric, in this warehouse by the end, I think?
At the height.
And 2 bathrooms.
It was close to 100, yeah.
Yeah.
And parking for 5.
I mean, literally, this was made on a shoestring, but it was a labor of love for much of the time. And so, yeah, we were in this warehouse that they could afford, porn district of Van Nuys. It was just, they put the World of Tomorrow's robot symbol on the building. It was like a little secret hideout. I'm sure people thought, what is going on in that building? Because at first there were blue screen stages to film with the doubles. And then once they started prepping for shoot, we could get rid of the stages, and it just got filled up with artists. So it was really a fascinating process, and like I said, a big family at first. But maybe we should talk about the story of how this movie got sold, because that's something I've never heard of since either. So at some point, once we had a cut of the movie, John...
Was it a cut, or was it like a sizzle reel?
Well, but once we had the cut of the movie, John decided, okay, we've got to make something that we can use as a sales tool to start thinking about selling this movie. So then we, while shots are being worked on and the cut was being refined, I think we started working on, I guess, what we call a sizzle reel, and it became the sales piece for this movie. I can't remember how long that was, Eric. Do you remember how long the sizzle reel was? Was it 12 minutes or 22 minutes?
I think it was 22, actually. I think.
Oh, so it was long. So anyway, we put this piece together, which is probably like highlights of things we've been watching today and things that were far enough along that we could show people that they would understand the look and the tone of the movie. So we put this piece together, and then the producers approached every head of every studio. And I can't remember, I think we had 13 we picked one day. They had a screening room somewhere. I can't remember where it was at the time. And they had allotted 1 hour for the heads from whoever they wanted to invite from the studio to come and watch this piece and talk about it and hear the pitch. So I think in the one day they did this, they weren't given choices of days. It was like, here's your day, here's the time slots available. And so one studio after another, and I think there was 13 of them, came to watch the sizzle reel and heard the pitch that day. And I've never heard of this happening any time before, because what studios come to you, right? But and that's how they got the interest in the studios. And so there was various studios that were interested right away. And then it became a little bit of a, bidding war, and Paramount ended up with the piece and they struck a deal. But the unfortunate part is they wanted it for their summer release. And so it really accelerated our schedule, and that really hurt our process because we weren't going to be ready. I think we were supposed to go another year, and instead we were given 6 months or something. Like, it all of a sudden changed everything. And so that's when this trajectory of this wonderful little movie changed, because the studio said, we'll help you take over. So then we had to bring in a VFX producing team to handle how to farm out I think we ended up doing about 1,000 shots in-house, and then the other 1,000 ended up being farmed out all over the world to various vendors. So a whole nother team of VFX producers had to come in to manage those extra shots just to get the shots done in the time for the release. So it changed the course of everything. Stress levels went way up. I mean, it was just really, it changed the feeling. Like, all of us, the family of us in the warehouse were, being inundated with new people, and the energy, just things escalated to a whole nother stress level. And we had to achieve those goals because we had a release date we had to hit. So it was pretty amazing.
And some of the people couldn't hang with it, and they'd say, well, how are you guys doing this? And it was that frog soup metaphor where, if you jump into a boiling pot of water, you're going to jump out. But if you're there from the beginning, you turn into frog soup. And we were definitely frog soup.
Let me ask you, how did you deal with this increase in stress and this different work dynamic when the studio came in?
Again, it's navigating politics, which as editors, we unfortunately have to do in our job. It's not always the most fun part of our job, but we have to do it. Listen, Paramount was super excited about this project at the time. Paul Hager was head of post at the time, and he was amazed by this project, and he was very supportive of me. It's the only time I got to work with him. And he's a legend in our editorial industry, running Paramount for all the years that he did. So he was a huge supporter. So it's just a matter of, okay, we just got to do what we do and try to figure out how to make this happen, because we were a very small team. We did have to bring in more visual effects editors because Tim and Eric and I couldn't handle everything anymore. So we had to bring in VFX editors to help get things to their department and ship things around the world. I mean, we had to concentrate on editorial. We were, the hub of where things come in and out, but VFX had to handle it for their part of it, because I think we had 5 VFX coordinators that came in, or producers, and they were all assigned 2 or 3 vendors each. So it just became a huge management thing that they all had to handle, and we just had to kind of keep our cool on our side. But we were excited. I mean, just like any project, anytime we would get like the next iteration of a shot, it was like, oh, Christmas today, we get to see 10 new shots coming in, because it was exciting for us to do that. Just like on any movie, you see the progress of it going from blue to simple backgrounds to black and white to color backgrounds. And but it was pretty crazy, and not the most fun part. It was very stressful. And then by then we were getting composers involved, and I was running the mixing stage, and we had a great sound designer, Todd Toon, who, got to do some really fun retro sounding stuff with all these robots and the little ray guns and all the fun, cool stuff that he brought to the project too. So, so luckily I got to go do all the finishing while the heavy VFX reviewing was going on. I mean, just to give you a scenario of how intense it got, I think they were reviewing shots 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I don't remember how long that went on, like 2 months in order to hit the deadline. It was crazy.
Wow.
And in the conditions that Eric mentioned, all of those people, I don't remember how many in that room, 20 people in a little room with no air. Like it was like slave labor in a weird way. But luckily I was off on an air-conditioned mixing stage, and they were all, reviewing these shots. And it was intense because there was limited amount of time, and there's I'm sure many things that they had to let through, even though, their standard was very high. But, deadlines are deadlines, and it had to get out there into the theaters.
Eric, what were you going to say?
Just some people live there. They really did. I mean, there was, they were reviewing shots 14 hours a day, but, shots were being created, and people just, that was their complete life. So they slept and they worked. And, I think it was 1,200 shots that our little Van Nuys warehouse created, and all off-the-shelf software, except for Pixar lent a little management tool called RenderMan, and that allowed us to set up our own little render farm. Most of the equipment was used, and the render farm air conditioner would go out, and it'd have to be shut down, the render farm, because it was just it was guerrilla filmmaking. It really, really was. And to have that other team come on, I don't want to be negative, but they were all getting paid twice as much as any of us who'd been like toiling, and it was a true labor of love. And, this was a day job for them. So it was like,
it was truly amazing how wonderful people in that core group there were. Carrie had lots of friends from CalArts, and and then people would bring in other people they knew of, and it was amazing, the talent and the technical wizards. I mean, Carrie's just a computer whiz himself, so we brought in other people to build these render farms, and it just the smarts of the people that were a part of this was amazing. I learned so much. I learned so much about the whole process, but I learned a lot of things about what not to do again, politically in my job, and, just to really propel me in my career. I've ended up doing many hybrid movies ever since, because, it just comes natural to those of us that have been doing it many, many years. But it was such a special time, and a special group of people.
And we all wanted to do it for Carrie because he's such a great guy. He's so funny, and he's, I want to say a general that you'll die for, but, he's not a general. It's just like we all went to battle for him, and it was, we have such great fond memories of that, and I'd love to do it again. We dream of it.
So let me ask you this. I love the fact that you both have such fond memories, despite the fact that obviously there was stress. There are all sorts of obstacles thrown in your respective ways over the course of the shoot. I love the fact that 20 years later, the memories that you have are so fond of making this film, and that you characterize this as a tremendous labor of love, because it obviously shows in the finished product. I don't think there's ever been another film like Sky Captain. Obviously, there have been films that have been made with this kind of a method, but there's never really been anything else quite like this. It's such a unique vision. I want to talk to you guys about the film's legacy. how do you both view this film's legacy, the impact that it's had on the industry? Obviously, it's had a very positive effect, as you both have said, on your respective careers. But how do you view its legacy? And what memories also do you have of the film's release?
The one thing that I am saddened by is that this movie was not as well received as we all felt it deserved when it came out in the theaters. I don't think people knew what to think of it. They weren't accepting of it. It was just a little too out there, I think. And so that saddens me that it didn't get a public acceptance that we were all hoping for. I don't know how we could have done that better, how they could have marketed it better. I don't know any of that. I just wish it was more well received widely. What I do know, being in the industry, is every time somebody looks at my resume or I talk about this movie, especially when I'm about to embark on a visual effects movie, everybody in the VFX world, that's older than 20 here, knows of this movie because of the, much like Star Wars. Star Wars was the first of its kind. This was the next step where we, did a whole movie in this workflow. So I feel like the legacy of the workflow and the technology is etched into the workflow of our industry now, whether people realize it or not. Previs, there's many previs companies that do amazing work out there now. And I think it's become common in many, many, many movies. I've done a couple Marvel projects and they use the same workflow. Eric's worked, on Mandalorian, same workflow, different tools now, but the same workflow is in place. And so that, I feel, is the movie's legacy, is that we owe a lot to what was learned on this movie.
I don't think it should have been a summer blockbuster. It was sort of an experimental type film, and it should have been treated maybe, they spent way too much money on it probably to have it be a festival film, but it really should have been nurtured and they should have created some sort of like buzz, like, have you seen this thing? Because the original idea that Carrie and Kevin had was that it be discovered. It's like, look at this old film that was found, and show it and frame it in that way. So, which was kind of crazy. I for years afterwards, I would be on a show. I worked on some big VFX things, like on John Carter, and that those people would tease me because I would always say, well, on Sky Captain, we did it this way. And, it's because we kind of invented it, and it was a friendly mocking, but I would say it a little bit too often. It's like, well, on Sky Captain. So that's my legacy.
Well, I have to say, Sabrina, I love the fact that you mentioned that when people look at your resume, they immediately get drawn towards Sky Captain. Because that was how this entire panel came together. I mean, when we were talking about EditFest ideas, and your name got brought up, I was like, oh my gosh, Sabrina edited Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow. I saw the movie the minute it hit theaters, and I have forever loved both of your guys' work on this film. And so it's funny that how people respond to you. I responded the exact same way with your body of work, immediately drawn towards Sky Captain.
Yeah, it's definitely for those of us in the industries, a movie that most people in the VFX world know about, and I love that we got to be a part of it. One sad little note in our transition from film, I remember a movie I did after I did Sky Captain. I was on the Paramount lot working on Charlotte's Web, and I remember walking down one of the streets where they had the old film reels, and they were at the time getting rid of film, and there were stacks of film reels in the middle of the road, and I just happened to look, and on the top of one of the stacks was reel one of Sky Captain, and I'm like, what is this film reel doing out there? Like, I couldn't find anybody. I'm like, I grabbed it. I still have that old film reel. But I'm like, this is so sad that film reels are being disposed of. But I had to grab reel one because reel one was, our longest labor of love in Sky Captain, because we spent so much time getting that right. But I'm like, oh, technology changes. Film is no longer. We hardly ever see it anymore.
I bought the trailer.
Well, I have to say,
I bought the trailer on eBay for $2.50, 35 millimeter.
So you guys are single-handedly preserving the analog, the 35 millimeter legacy of Sky Captain alone.
Trying.
I have to say, I feel like those two delightful stories are perfect ways to close us off for the afternoon. Sabrina and Eric, I can't believe that we've been talking for almost an hour and a half, if not more. I mean, this has been a ridiculous pleasure to speak with both of you and to explore the creation, the legacy of this extraordinary, incredibly influential film. So I thank you both for taking the time to sit down with me today, and to sit down with all of us, and with everybody that's in the audience, to explore this film.
Yeah, it's wonderful that the word is getting out for those of the people in the world who haven't seen the movie or want to explore it again. There's some interesting things on YouTube about the making of, which is really fun. So I want the legacy of this movie to live on. And I love this poster back here. It's one of my favorite posters ever. It just captures the feel of the art and the look of the movie. And I just love that people are still interested.
I feel incredibly lucky to have been able to work on it and made some really good lifelong friends from it.
Absolutely. I think this film's legacy is going to live on long past any of us. And so I think it's the lasting power of cinema. And also a huge thank you to Ace for hosting us and for letting us talk about Sky Captain for an hour and a half. This has been such a gift. So a huge thank you to our friends over at Ace for doing this.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody who contributed to this piece.